The story of Noah's Ark is one of the most well-known biblical narratives, originating in the Book of Genesis, chapters 6 through 9. According to the account, God, disheartened by the wickedness of humanity, decides to cleanse the earth with a great flood, sparing only Noah, his family, and a select number of animals, who were to be saved aboard a massive ark. After the floodwaters recede, the ark is said to have come to rest on the mountains of Ararat, now modern-day Turkey, but formerly a part of the Armenian highlands. Beyond this, the Bible doesn't actually tell us what happens to the ark. After the last pair of animals disembark from this massive vessel, we don't really know what happened to it. It's hard to imagine that it was just simply abandoned, considering how vital it had been to this chapter's protagonist, but it never seems to crop up again in the Bible. The fate of Noah's Ark, therefore, is subject to various theories, spanning from traditional religious interpretations to modern archaeological and scientific inquiries. In today's episode, we'll be diving into these very theories, whilst considering the viewpoint of traditional believers that the Ark did exist, and therefore could potentially still exist in some form or another. The fate of Noah's Ark has been the subject of speculation for millennia, with theories ranging from traditional religious beliefs that see the Ark as a real, tangible construct, to the more scientific hypothesis that see the Ark as a fictional component in a larger allegorical story. Some believe the Ark was destroyed or dismantled, while others claim that at least the framework of the boat still lies somewhere in the region of Ararat. With the Judeo-Christian notion holding that Noah's Ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, in accordance with Genesis 8:4, some traditions maintain that the Ark may have remained intact for centuries, as a monument to God's covenant with humanity. Various religious figures, including the early church fathers and medieval theologians, speculated about the Ark's possible discovery. Over time, some believe the Ark had been destroyed or repurposed, with its wood possibly being used for building materials by Noah and his descendants. Others suggest it decayed naturally over thousands of years. These views are largely faith-based, with no direct physical evidence to substantiate the claims. Several modern expeditions have been launched to find Noah's Ark, particularly on Mount Ararat, but none have yielded conclusive evidence. Over the centuries, numerous individuals and groups have claimed to have seen the Ark, or parts of it. One of the earliest recorded claims come from Flavius Josephus, a 1st century Jewish historian, who mentioned in his writings that the remains of the Ark could still be seen on Mount Ararat in his day. Interestingly, Josephus's account does change slightly, where he later details Haran, a southeastern region of Turkey, as being the true location where the Ark ended up. Here, Flavius noted that the locals would show the remains of the boat to visitors. On top of this, yet another mountain is also put forward as the potential resting place of the Ark, and this is Mount Judi, also located in Turkey. In the 20th century, searches on Mount Ararat intensified, with explorers such as James Irvine, a former Apollo astronaut, and Ron Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, leading expeditions to locate the Ark. Wyatt, in particular, claimed to have discovered what appeared to be a boat-like structure in the mountains of Turkey, although most archaeologists and scholars dismissed his findings as inconclusive, or misinterpretations of natural rock formations, specifically the Deripana site, that was located during a geodetic survey of Turkey in 1959. Many scholars and archaeologists are skeptical about the Ark's existence as a literal object. Geological studies suggest that the likelihood of a global flood, which covered all landmasses as described in the Bible, is scientifically implausible. Instead, some scientists believe that the flood narrative may have originated from local flood events in ancient Mesopotamia, possibly around 7,000 years ago. when the Black Sea was flooded by rising Mediterranean waters. In this view, Noah's Ark could have been based on a smaller regional boat or vessel built by a historical figure during a significant local flood. The story would then have been passed down through generations, becoming more mythologized over time. The Epic of Gilgamesh, a Mesopotamian text, shares a similar flood narrative with the Noah story, suggesting that both may stem from the same regional flood traditions. Another theory posits that the Ark may have been destroyed or buried by natural forces, such as glaciers, earthquakes, or volcanic eruptions. Mount Ararat itself is a volcanic mountain, and seismic activity in the region over millennia may have obliterated any traces of a wooden structure. Among those who interpret the story allegorically, many do not believe that the Ark was a real physical structure that can be discovered through archaeology. They argue that the search for the Ark is misguided because the narrative's power lies in its spiritual and moral teachings, rather than its physical reality. According to this view, Noah's Ark, like other biblical stories with allegorical significance, such as the Garden of Eden or Jonah's encounter with the whale, is intended to convey deeper truths about God's relationship with humanity, not to provide a historical account that can be verified through material evidence. For these believers, focusing on the Ark's literal existence risks overshadowing the essential messages of faith, obedience, repentance, and renewal that the story seeks to communicate. They emphasize that whether or not the Ark ever existed in the real world is secondary to the timeless religious and ethical principles that the story teaches. In modern theological discourse, the debate over whether Noah's Ark was a historical object or a symbolic narrative reflects broader discussions about how to interpret ancient texts in light of contemporary knowledge. Many progressive Christian and Jewish theologians argue that sacred texts, like the Bible, were written in a context where myth and history were often intertwined. For them, it is not necessary to believe in the truth of every biblical event in order to appreciate its religious significance. This perspective aligns with what is known as the mythopoetic interpretation of the Bible, where the purpose of stories like Noah's Ark is seen not as providing a factual account, but as articulating universal truths about human existence and the potential for moral and spiritual transformation. Whilst the Bible is quite clear that the Ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, the Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish apocryphal text, aims to be more specific, indicating that the Ark came to rest on a particular mountain known as Lubar. Yet this brings us no closer to really knowing anything else in regards to the fate of the vessel. Interestingly, there are those who argue that because the Bible does not refer nor describe the Ark as being holy or divine, little is given to ascertain what happened to it after Noah disembarked from it. Some readers, therefore, are led to believe that it does not matter what happened to the Ark, for if it did, the Bible would have surely gone into more detail, or circled back to address it at some point. Nonetheless, this has not stopped us from searching for the boat, and it might surprise some of you that the search has been going on for thousands of years, all the way back to the 6th century BC, during the reign of Assyrian king Sennacherib. It is said that King Sennacherib found a beam from the Ark, and believing that it was surely a significant piece of material, having come from the Ark that delivered Noah, he fashioned the wood into an idol. Rumours and hearsay that circulated about in the times of the early Christian church would help to aid the notion that the lost ship was real, especially when stories of the Ark's remains were said to be spread, helping to preserve the legacy, if not the mystery of the Ark, for the time being. The Bishop of Salamis in 4th century Cyprus, Epiphanius of Salamis, wrote of such accounts. He tells us, "Thus even today the remains of Noah's Ark are still shown in Gordine." In this version, a popular narrative amongst ancient Armenians was that the Ark was here at Gordine, atop the aforementioned Mount Judy. In later tradition, Mount Judy and Mount Ararat would become conflated. Stories of the Ark's discovery continued well into the 5th century, where a legend exists of the Bishop of Nisibis, a saint also known as Jacob of Nisibis, who once scaled the Armenian highlands in search of the Ark. Near the summit of one of the mountains, an angel visited Jacob in his sleep and told him that he should climb no further. As consolation for his efforts on this journey, the angel rewarded Jacob with a board from the Ark. Supposedly, Jacob brought this artifact back to Cyprus, where it was said to be preserved. Interestingly, this would become something of an ongoing legend, particularly for the Christian Armenians, who would come to believe that climbing the mountain at all was a taboo, and that the angels had a reason for wanting to keep man away from the peak, and perhaps from the Ark itself. Considering the harsh conditions near the summit, including a thick snow line and treacherous precipices, many travellers did not believe the ascent was possible anyway, which went hand in hand with another theory that angels were attempting to protect humanity by dissuading them from even trying. According to Islamic interpretations, the Quran describes the Ark as having come to rest upon Al-Judi, now believed to be Mount Judy. According to one legend, the father-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, Omar ibn al-Khattab, was said to have found the Ark and used the wood of the vessel to build a mosque. Whilst there is no definitive proof that the Ark was seen, much less approached in the early years of the Common Era, it did not stop people from believing it was there atop Mount Ararat. Medieval historiographer Hayton of Coricus claimed that there was a definitive black shape atop the mountain, which he believed many people associated with the Ark. Others, though, were less convinced even in those times, with the likes of English statesman Sir Walter Raleigh believing that the final resting place of the Ark was not atop Mount Ararat exactly, but rather could have been anchored somewhere amongst the Ararat region, including the Taurus, Caucasus, and Paropamisus mountain ranges. With this idea, Raleigh attempted to build his own theory that the Ark could have rested at the eastern end of Mesopotamia, which might explain why Noah's descendants migrated from the east in Genesis 11:2 before coming to Shinar. A couple hundred years prior to this, 13th century German rabbi Patakiel Resenberg was far less optimistic, believing that the Ark wasn't anywhere on the Ararat Mountains, nor anywhere at all, because by that time it would have simply decayed. It wasn't until the 1800s did anyone actually try to ascend Ararat, where in 1829 Baltic German mountaineer Friedrich Perret made it to the summit successfully. Perret confirmed earlier reports of the Armenian legend, saying, "All the Armenians are firmly persuaded that Noah's Ark remains to this very day on the top of Ararat, and that in order to preserve it, no human being is allowed to approach it." Whilst Perret did not find the Ark on his expedition, he was nonetheless cautious that it might have been up there. In fact, he considered the ice water at the summit to be sacred, and even brought some of it down with him in a bottle, believing it to be holy. But alas, the first time someone actually ascended the mountain, they did not stumble upon the ship, nor saw any real sign of it. This was different to the second person who scaled the mountain, British historian James Bryce. In 1876, nearly 50 years after Perret's attempt, Bryce claimed to have discovered a piece of wood that was 4 feet long and 5 inches thick. The wood had been cut with some precision, indicating that tools had been involved, and that it was so high above the tree line that it could not have been a natural fragment of bark or branch. Breaking a piece of the wood for himself, Bryce argued that it could by all means be a remnant of Noah's Ark, and whilst he didn't find the ship, he had found some tangible evidence that it had been here. However, Bryce did later come to the conclusion that he had found a more plausible explanation for the wood, but he would not tell anyone for fear of discrediting the relic he had acquired. By the 20th century, many expeditions of Mount Ararat took place in search of Noah's Ark. Funded by evangelical churches, the frenzy of Ark hunting was dialed up, probably due to the fact that these churches were able to produce publications in the form of magazines and even appear on TV, all of which helped promote the idea that Noah's Ark was real and would soon be found. One of the earlier cases of the Ark being found, or at least spotted, comes from an article that appeared in an evangelical publication known as New Eden in the 1940s. Supposedly, a Russian aviator named Vladimir Voskovitsky was testing the flight of an aeroplane with a new supercharger. Flying near Mount Ararat, Voskovitsky and his co-pilot claimed to have seen an enormous shipwreck on the shore of a lake on the mountain. His captain later sent a report of this sighting to his superiors, and apparently the site was investigated by 150 soldiers. However, the report of what they found there was supposedly suppressed, presumably by the Russian government, who did not want religion to be validated by admitting they had found the Ark. The story grew to be quite popular, but it was eventually debunked when it was revealed that the editor of the New Eden magazine, Floyd M. Gurley, had fabricated much of the account, including the pilots in question. A more hopeful event also took place in the 1940s, when a reporter for the Associated Press, Edwin Greenwald, reported that Kurdish villagers were said to have discovered a large wooden ship on Mount Ararat. According to Greenwald's report, a farmer named Rashid was believed to have found the ship's prow about 2/3 of the way up the mountain, and that after Rashid's discovery, many locals had climbed Mount Ararat to see it. The dean of the People's Bible College in North Carolina, Aaron J. Smith, took it upon himself to investigate these claims. Joined by Greenwald, they set out with the intention of hiring Rashid as a guide, but mysteriously, he could not be located. Greenwald's report claimed that many local people had climbed Mount Ararat to see the Ark, but upon further inspection, none of these people could be found. Reports continued well into the second half of the century. In one account, Armenian-American Georgy Hagopian told a tale that his uncle had once taken him to see the Ark when he was a child, and that the Ark was a moss-covered vessel that was sat at the edge of a cliff, so that only one side was accessible. Supposedly, Hagopian told that many children of his community had seen the Ark, seemingly having climbed with relative ease in comparison to the difficulty that experienced adult explorers would report having. Hagopian also told that this uncle of his wanted to keep a piece of the Ark, but that when he tried to cut into the wood, or later blast it with gunpowder, he was unsuccessful. This was later corroborated with modern Christian theories that God would not allow anyone to damage the Ark, and therefore no piece of it could ever be used as evidence. In the 1980s, the search for Noah's Ark had been largely popularized by former astronaut James Irwin, who though made 8 trips to Mount Ararat, including a near-fatal one, found nothing of real merit. Nonetheless, it did provoke other explorers to try their hand at finding one of the most elusive vehicles in history. But of course with that, also came more and more stories of those who had supposedly come into contact with it already. According to the United States Army Corps engineer, Ed Davis, who'd been a sergeant in 1943, he was stationed in Hamadan in western Iran, where he was to work on the Persian Corridor. Here, Davis claimed he met a local driver named Badi, as well as his father, Abbas Abbas. These men claimed to have seen Noah's Ark at the top of their village, where the vessel had remained. on one seasonally hot day in July, Abbas invited Davis to join them on a visit to the Ark, believing that the snow and ice had melted just enough that the ship would be partially exposed. Upon reaching the location, Davis claimed he saw the Ark, which he thought at first appeared to be a huge rock formation that was covered by fog. According to this account, the Ark was lying in a cove lake within a canyon below his position and was broken into two portions. Attempts to verify Davis's story have been unsuccessful, and there are those who question the legitimacy of the story, noting that Davis retold the story with different details, as well as the fact that none of his companions from this time can be identified. American writer and president of the Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute, Bob Cornuck, decided that the Ark might not have been on Mount Ararat at all, but had deduced that perhaps Ed Davis had the right of it, and that the Ark was somewhere in Iran. In 2006, Cornuck's institute announced the discovery of what was believed to be a large structure of petrified wood on Mount Takht-i-Suleiman in the Alborz. This object, which was located 13,000 feet above sea level, was believed to be a similar size that the Ark probably would have been, and was possibly the same ship that Ed Davis had come across. However, critics of the expedition, including geologists, believed that this object is not petrified wood, and that many who had seen the object in question were ministry leaders, not scientists. In 2010, Cornuck announced that he had ceased searching for Noah's Ark, saying, "I came down from the mountain with all this evidence for Noah's Ark, and nobody cared." The fate of Noah's Ark remains one of the enduring mysteries of religious tradition and history. Whether the Ark still exists in some form on Mount Ararat or elsewhere, or whether it is a purely symbolic or mythological construct, continues to be a topic of debate. While expeditions and investigations continue, definitive proof of the Ark's existence has yet to be found. The story of Noah's Ark, however, continues to inspire exploration, theological reflection, and scientific inquiry, serving as a potent narrative about faith, survival, and the almighty power of a merciful yet wrathful deity. As always, guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then don't forget to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.